Hi guys, you're about to watch the free podcast of the Young Turks, fun for everybody. Now, you understand that there's only two of our segments. We do a live 2-hour show every day, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern.
And if you want to hear the entire show, all you have to do is become a member. Sign up by going to TYT-08.06.14.
You can go under member options to become a member, and when you do that, it's totally convenient. You can either stream or download the show, audio or video. Plus, you get more of our network shows. There's no ads whatsoever, and you help support the show. So, TYTnetwork.com. We'll see you there. Today. Okay, today on the show, Ebola. But don't worry, you won't get Ebola until the second hour. But it's just a little bit of Ebola, so I guess it's minute Ebola. That's not right. None of this is right. Okay, only basketball fans got that reference. We're moving forward. Yes, of course I'm going to start with depressing Israeli news. That's okay. Actually, we have a little bit of a ceasefire that's holding. It's not so bad. And it turns out there's an American hero in our own audience that's going to uplift you guys about that situation. I'm going to get to him in the first segment. And then later in the program, the Yazidi. Who are they? Why do we need to rescue them? Why is it not going to happen? Also, two stories about corruption that are phenomenal. One involves a lobbyist literally picking who's going to work for a congressman. It's only the third-ranking Republican. And then furthermore, a guy in Germany gets out of a bribe trial by bribing Germany. All right, that is later in the program, and like I said, you will get Ebola in the second hour. I don't know why I find that so funny. It's not. Fix your face, okay? All right, I'm in a weird mood, as you can tell. Now, I don't know how that's going to work out when we go to Gaza. All right, so let's get there. Let's do it. So latest from Gaza is actually not so bad. I know, shocking, right? Second day of the ceasefire, it seems to be holding for now. This is an enormous relief given that the last ceasefire literally lasted 6 minutes. Unbelievable. That's got to be a world record for shortest ceasefire ever. So the fact that we're in the second day is fantastic here. Two sides are negotiating in Egypt. What the Israelis want is to demilitarize Hamas completely. I don't know, honestly, how they would get assurances on that, but it's a fair request. And on the Palestinian side, they're asking for the borders to be open, which is also a fair request. That might be a great trade. I would sign off on that immediately, but I'm not there, and neither side cares what I think. So now part of the answer might be reconstructing Gaza. And right now, Mahmoud Abbas, who is actually the leader of the Palestinians in the West Bank, is trying to get a negotiated deal where a lot of foreign countries would put in a lot of money, Europeans, Americans, et cetera, to rebuild Gaza. So now it's kind of a funny thing. We bomb the hell out of Gaza with U.S.-made weapons, and then we spend more money rebuilding it. But actually, it's not as weird and silly as you might think, because either way, the people who control our government, meaning the donors, get what they want. You defense contractors have money spent on their bombs, and then the people rebuilding get money spent on them, construction jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So people get rich off of this as well. So it's a little depressing, but if they can actually come to an agreement, I'll take it. I'll take it. It's a hell of a lot better than what we have right now over there. Of course, the death toll continues to be lopsided. Over 1,900 Palestinians have been killed. 75% of them are civilians, according to the United Nations. 67 Israelis killed, 3 of them civilians. And then look at this. We had an arrest of Hussam Kawasmi. It's great. He's a 40-year-old resident of the West Bank, and he apparently is one of the people who helped to kidnap the 3 Israeli teens and kill them. So it's great that he's been arrested. Now, the weird part of that story is he was arrested in the West Bank. So remind me again why Israel had to obliterate Gaza. Remember, the original thing was those 3 teenagers were kidnapped and killed, and we're so outraged. And so that's why we had to go get Gaza. And it turns out the guy they arrested for that is in the West Bank. It's almost as if it was an excuse. All right, now, on the other hand, we have a fascinating piece of footage from NDTV. That's an Indian TV network. they tracked what was, it appears to be a Hamas operation in a densely populated area of Gaza. They thought that it might be to launch rockets. You'll see what happens at the end, and that it is the place that you're going to see in this video is close to the residential area, and it is close to a bunch of hotels. So let's watch.
By reasonable doubt, it's fair to guess that this is a potential Hamas rocket launching site that's being set up. There's always been this question of how Hamas manages to fire its rockets without being detected by the Israelis. This perhaps is one of the ways of assembling it under a tent. It also establishes something which Hamas has always been accused of, that they actually use densely populated civilian areas to fire their rockets. So now, as you can see, the tent has been removed. Whatever they were doing under the tent is clearly over. We also find that they're not two people, two individuals, but three who are behind this particular activity, and they've placed a sort of a bush on top of whatever they've buried under the sand, and also they're using a spade to cover it up with mud, and it looks like they're prepared to leave. But of course, during this whole process, they were running some cables out from under the tent to somewhere at the back, and it now remains to be seen whether if this is indeed a Hamas rocket launch site.
So that's the rocket being fired today morning, a day after it was assembled at the exact spot the rocket has been fired. That's the smoke. We just shot a video of it in the immediate aftermath.
Interesting video. It's nearly impossible to confirm anything coming out of Gaza one way or another. It smells a tiny bit funny because it's just so convenient that they happen to have found this footage, track it all the way throughout. It's an Indian television station, so they happen to speak English so that everybody in the West can understand what the guy is saying as this whole thing is set up. But it doesn't really matter, because I believe that Hamas is firing rockets from densely populated areas, because there's very little parts of Gaza that aren't densely populated. So it's kind of a weird argument to make, like, how dare you fire rockets from Gaza, from densely populated? Well, where's the non-densely populated areas of Gaza? I mean, it's tiny. We showed you before. It's a tiny fraction of the city of Los Angeles, the size of it. It's packed full of cities. And I never thought that Hamas was going in the middle of the desert going, hey, Israeli forces, we're right here. We're going to fire the rocket from right here. So, and by the way, it doesn't excuse their actions. First of all, they should never fire the rockets. And second of all, yes, they should not fire them from those areas, right? Yeah, if you ask me, you shouldn't fire the rockets. If you're going to, yeah, you should fire them from the desert, because then you might not get people killed. So it doesn't, in the end, this video is interesting, and it's good because it presents another side that we haven't seen in this conflict. We haven't seen a lot of footage of what Hamas has been doing, right? But it's not altogether that surprising, because we thought Hamas was doing the wrong thing in terms of firing rockets anyway. So oftentimes people will say, oh, why don't you criticize Hamas? But to the American media, to us, to whoever, except that Hamas is universally criticized. I don't know anyone who doesn't criticize Hamas. That part is easy. The question is, what do our allies do? What do the people who we give a lot of money to, what do they do that are supposed to listen to us, that are supposed to be a democracy? What, ISIS does, that they're a terrorist group operating out of Syria and Iraq, there's nothing we can do about that. We could fight them, but we can't influence them. We can influence our allies. That's why you often see coverage that says, hey, what is Israel doing? Because we can't control Hamas, but we think that we might be able to get Israel to do the right things. Now, good luck to us. It hasn't happened so far in this conflict. So to that point, on the idea of using civilians as shields, interesting article out of an Israeli publication, Annette, and they explain how Israel has often used Palestinians as human shields, and civilians at that, of course. Now, this is from a while back. The Israeli court had ruled on this over a span of 5 years. So it's not in this conflict, but they wanted to remind people of what had happened in the past. According to defense officials, the Israeli Defense Forces made use of the human shield procedure on 1,200 occasions over the last 5 years. So it's very ironic that Israel says, can you believe they use human shields, when Israeli courts have ruled that the Israeli Defense Forces have used human shields 1,200 times. Now, they continue. An 18-year-old Palestinian was killed in 2002 during one such operation. You're going to see why in a second. They describe how it happens. Individual Palestinians, and this is, by the way, an Israeli government memo leaked by WikiLeaks. This is very interesting. Individual Palestinians also testified to Israeli Defense Forces abuses such as looting, beatings, vandalism of property, and the use of local population as human shields. But by far the strongest reverberation in Israel was that created by the Israeli organization Breaking the Silence, which collected testimony from 26 unnamed IDF soldiers. All the soldiers had been involved in Operation Cast Lead in the Gaza Strip and testified to instances where Gazans were used as human shields. Incendiary phosphorus shells were fired over civilian population areas, and other examples of excessive firepower that caused unnecessary fatalities and the destruction of property. So I bring this up to you because Netanyahu had a big press conference today saying, well, we had to do everything we did. Hamas made me do it because the Palestinians use human shields. When in fact, Israeli courts and internal Israeli memos have confirmed that Israel has used human shields well over 1,000 times. Last two quotes, one's from The Nation here. Israeli soldiers have systematically used Palestinians as human shields since Israel's incursion into the West Bank in 2002. It has used Palestinians as human shields by tying young Palestinians onto the hoods of their cars or forcing them to go into a home where a potential militant may be hiding. Now, the Israeli government position is, since Hamas fires rockets, as we saw in that video, from densely populated areas, in essence, they're using human shields because they don't want to get bombed back, and then Israel would kill civilians, and then they would blame Israel. But in Israel's case, it's not an analogy. It's not kind of. It's not, well, in essence. No. They tied a young boy to the hood of a car as they're going in so that nobody would fire on them. And in fact, here's another one from The Guardian. Israel, meanwhile, does not have an unblemished record in the use of human shields. In 2010, 2 soldiers were convicted in an IDF military court of using an 11-year-old Palestinian boy as a human shield in its 2008 and 2009 operation in Gaza. The pair ordered the child to search bags they suspected of being booby-trapped. An 11-year-old. Now, to be fair to Israel, you see they got convicted, so that's good. And we want their ally. We want them to be a democracy. We want them to enforce the rule of law. But certainly no clean hands in this conflict in either side, as you clearly have Israel that has used human shields over and over again. And oftentimes they would enter homes with a Palestinian civilian in front of them so that if anybody got shot, it would be that person. That's about as much of a human shield as you could possibly get. But today, let me again end on a slightly positive note that at least a ceasefire is held into a second day, which previously seemed unimaginable. Okay. Now, let me go to what the purposes here are, and this is where it gets a little worse. Okay. Now, Israel has had yet another incursion into Gaza, of course, which we've been covering on the show for weeks here. And they say it's because Hamas is firing rockets. They just arrested the guy who killed the 3 Israeli teenagers, which they claimed was the beginning of this whole mess. They said Hamas captured them. Hamas never took responsibility for that, and there's apparently evidence that the Israelis have that it was not Hamas. At best, it was a Hamas offshoot not sanctioned by Hamas. And by the way, that offshoot didn't want peace. Okay, they're also massive right-wingers. They're for war, and they were afraid that Hamas was going to agree to a peace deal because they had just joined up with Fatah, who's more peaceful in the West Bank. So we have right-wingers on the Palestinian side trying to drive us into a war. They kidnapped 3 Israelis and killed them, right? So now, apparently, according to reporting out of Israel, Netanyahu's government knows that. They pretend that they don't know that the kids are killed in order to go arrest hundreds of people from Hamas who didn't actually do it. Now we arrest the actual guy who did it. It turns out he's not in Gaza at all. He's in the West Bank. So there's a question as to what was the real motivation of both sides. Now, I explained the Palestinian side there. Let's go to the Israeli side. Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu has never agreed to a peace deal. And as you're going to see from his quotes here, doesn't want a peace deal. So, oh, look at that. We have hostilities. And I arrested hundreds of people from Hamas for a crime that it looks like we kind of have evidence that they didn't do. It was their splinter group, and we got them after the war is basically completed for now because Israel has started withdrawing ground troops. And so why did you do it anyway? Well, here's a possible explanation from Shmuel Sandler. He says the conflict with Hamas and Gaza gives him, meaning Netanyahu, more reason to say that the U.S. assurances aren't good enough to justify pulling back in the West Bank. In other words, oh my God, look at this war I just started. You see how we have no security? So that's why I can't do a peace deal. I mean, you want me to do a peace deal where I'm going to trust the Palestinians aren't going to fire rockets at us. They just fired rockets at us after I provoked them. Wait, did I say that out loud? Okay, actually you did, because here's what Netanyahu himself said. He said, the Israeli people understand now what I always say. There cannot be a situation under any agreement in which we relinquish security control of the territory west of the Jordan River. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the geography there, of course, which is almost all of us, let me fill you in. That's a large part of the West Bank. That means I am not going to trade land for peace. I am not going to do a two-state solution. I will keep that land. Right-wingers on both sides, driving us deeper into war. By the way, Netanyahu's popularity rating skyrocketing now. Last poll I saw, he was at 85% approval for this war. Turns out when you have wars started by the right wing get more popular. Now, I wish the American people, the Israeli people, Palestinian people all over the world wouldn't fall for that trick, but they do every time. So even though it looks like they devastated Gaza, and what did they really get in return? Turns out the mission might have been accomplished because the mission was more war, so that the more pro-war parties can stay in power. So now we go to a report out of the UK, and they had investigators look in to see what's happening in Gaza and how Israel's treating that area. Here's some of their conclusions. We saw a country whose people have known immense suffering now imposing conditions on their Palestinian neighbors which cause a different but very real suffering and often without real security justification. So now that's a strong ally of Israel saying not only are they punishing collectively the people of Gaza, but without a real security justification. They continue. We saw Israel taking a range of actions that hinder Palestinian economic development and must, at the very least, cause deep resentment on the Palestinian side, even amongst the most moderate and pragmatic people, and so will actually worsen Israel's own security. Now, there's a point we've been making a lot. One, bombing Palestinians doesn't make them more pro-Israel. Shocking. Who could have figured that? It doesn't make them more likely to do a peace deal. Again, that's the whole point, because Netanyahu's government doesn't want a peace deal. And then lastly, does it actually help Israel's own security? No, it clearly doesn't. It drives people to more hatred, which I'm going to get to in a second, because there's a devastating article from a Palestinian reporter that explains, unfortunately, exactly how that's happening. But once again, that was their mission. Okay, so the British International Development Committee continues, the UK should, in concert with other European countries, stress to the Israeli authorities the unacceptability of the present situation. Now, whether they're going to do that is, of course, a different question. Someone from the Foreign Minister's office in the UK resigned today, saying that UK is not an honest broker in this Middle Eastern conflict, that they are taking the side of Israel, right or wrong, and damn the facts. One final note from this report, they say some are contrary to Israel's obligations under international law, their actions, and also run the risk of making the security situation worse. Again, security not better, worse. The war does not accomplish anything if you're interested in Israeli security. What it does accomplish is better approval ratings for warmongers. Now, let's go to the Palestinian side and see what the reaction has been. See if they are now bowing their heads and saying, yes, well, of course, we should do a peace deal with Israel because they're so strong and they keep killing us. It turns out it might have had the opposite reaction. Asma Al-Ghul is a reporter in the Palestinian territories. She also has family there, right? She lives there. She explained that she recently visited her relatives, and then she left them, and unfortunately, the very next day, they were killed. And so that's where we pick up the story. She said, my father's brother, Ismail Al-Ghul, was not a member of Hamas. His wife, Kadra, was not a militant of Hamas. Their sons Wa'il and Muhammad were not combatants for Hamas. Their daughters Hanadi, 28, and Asma, 22, were not operatives for Hamas, nor were my cousins Wa'il's children, Ismail, 11, Malak, 5, and baby Mustafa, only 24 days old. Members of the Islamic Jihad, the Popular Front of the Liberation of Palestine, or Fatah. Yet they all died in the Israeli shelling that targeted their home at 6:20 a.m. on Sunday morning. That baby, who was 24 days old, was born with as a twin. He has a twin brother who's still alive, miraculously survived the bombing, but he has passed away, as well as obviously a huge part of the family. So Al-Ghul continues, if it is Hamas that you hate, let me tell you that the people you are killing have nothing to do with Hamas. They are women, children, men, and senior citizens whose only concern was for the war to end, so they can return to their lives and daily routines. But let me assure you that you have now created thousands, no millions, of Hamas loyalists. For we all become Hamas if Hamas to you is women, children, and innocent families. If Hamas in your eyes is ordinary civilians and families, then I am Hamas. They are Hamas, and we are all Hamas. Now let's pause here. Now, does this look like a productive war for Israel? That you have taken the entire population of Gaza and you've bombed them and killed civilians in the process. 75% of the 1,900 people dead are civilians. And now you have made thousands and perhaps millions of more enemies. And you have driven them into the arms of warmongers on the other side. Again, if you're an Israeli citizen, it is a disaster of epic proportions. Now these people will fight you forever. But if you're an Israeli right-winger who feeds off of this and then gets elected and gets a little bit more power for themselves through war, well, then you love this because you just drove Palestinians to permanent war and you're the permanent war party in Israel. So Likud loves this. Netanyahu thinks, great, mission accomplished. Let me end on devastating ending of this article by Asma Al-Ghul. She says, I discovered the photos of my dead relatives on social networking sites. The bodies of my cousin's children were stored in an ice cream freezer. In the photos taken after their death, my family looked so peaceful, asleep with their eyes closed. None of them were disfigured or burned, unlike hundreds of dead children and civilians that U.S.-made weapons killed before. Great, now we've turned them against us as well. We wondered if they died in pain. What happened when the missile carrying tons of explosives impacted their modest house and exploded, creating air pressure so fierce that their internal organs burst. Finally, she says, now the house and its future memories have been laid to waste, its children taken to early graves, homes and recollections bombed into oblivion, their inhabitants homeless and lost, just as their camp always had been, because they were refugees. Never ask me about peace again. So here was a civilian with a civilian family, and now she says, never ask me about peace again. If you're a right-winger on either side, you're a warmonger on either side, you never want peace, well, your mission was accomplished. Okay, now I gotta end on a positive note, and it comes from one of you guys. So let me tell you about that, because otherwise it's too hard to deal with. Okay. At one point in the show last week, I had shown footage of Gaza being bombed, and Israeli officials kept saying, well, you know, they're civilians, but Hamas fired rockets nearby them, so it is what it is. And they fired into hospitals, they fired into schools, into shelters, and it just seemed to show that they did not care nearly as much about Palestinian civilians as Israeli civilians or Jewish civilians. Now, I don't think that's a stretch to say that. I think anybody with common sense knows that. And I said, what if there was 10,000 Jews scattered among the Palestinians in Gaza? Would Israel launch bombs as indiscriminately as they have been? And everybody knows the answer to that. Of course they wouldn't, right? Because they value those civilians more than they value Palestinian civilians. Well, apparently that reached Mark Whitmire, who is a listener to the Young Turks, and he's actually a volunteer for Wolfpack in Tennessee. He's a great, great guy, as you're about to see. So he wrote in this letter to us. He said, I was watching the episode today about the Holocaust survivor, Gabor Mate, and in it, Cenk made the observation that a Palestinian child is no different than an Israeli child, other than the labels that we place on them, and the loss of any child or innocent human being, for that matter, is a horrible tragedy. He also brought up the fact that Israelis don't see it that way, and that if we place 10,000 Jews sporadically around the country in civilian areas, that it is almost guaranteed that the ludicrous and completely erratic bombing would likely cease. And then he says, and remember, Mark lives in Tennessee, I have a job, a house, a dog, etc., and I live in relative comfort. It is unfathomable to even imagine that right now at this moment, somewhere in the world, as I sit in my air-conditioned home full of food with no fear of harm whatsoever, that there are children devoid of any involvement to provoke this attack, living in constant fear of death and dismemberment from mostly American-made weapons. Their only crime was being born in a prison/war zone with no chance of escape. He then says, I cannot sit here like this, safe and happy, while a travesty like this happens any longer. I have to do something. And he explains, I am Jewish by blood. And when Cenk said that about putting the 10,000 Jews in Gaza, it got me thinking, I want to go to Gaza. I want to bring 10,000, or however many would be significant enough to stop this madness, other Jewish people, to go and have a sit-in to demand that this relentless slaughter stops. I want to stay there to show Israel that if they want to eradicate those poor people, they're going to have to spill Jewish blood to do it. This has to stop. And then he concluded by saying, I have no idea how to get into Gaza. I do not have connections to reach 10,000 Jews, even if I knew how to get them there. All I have is my moral compass and limited skills from my time in the army. If there is any way that TYT can kick this off and use their base of millions of viewers to round up enough people to go and save Gaza, then I'm in. I don't want to die without ever doing something good for humanity. Now, we have a 2-day ceasefire that seems to be holding in Gaza, and thank God Mark doesn't have to go, no one else has to go for now, right? And I don't know that I could have ever marshaled anyone in good conscience to go into Gaza and stand there under the bombing. But it was a rhetorical point. But I love Mark for taking it seriously and saying, I'm right here, and I volunteer. Imagine the courage. And one, I love him for caring so much about every child in the world and wanting to do something about it to stop the madness. It doesn't matter what their ethnicity, their religion, or their nationality is. And two, to the people out there who get so mad at Israel that they think that they should be mad at all Jews. These are the Jews I know, people like Mark Whitmire. And your anti-Semitism is totally unwarranted and totally counterproductive. We can disagree with a country or its government's actions, as we do here in the U.S., as we do in this case with Israel, without getting into people's religion, race, or nationality. We're progressives. We're better than that. And Mark has shown through his great humanity, if you ever doubted people based on their religion, in his case, Judaism, remember Mark and remember what he was willing to do. And then ask yourself this question. Would you have done it? Would you be that brave? Mark, you're a great American. It's great to have you as a viewer. It's great to have you as a volunteer in Wolfpack to try to clean up our democracy here in America. We love you for the effort. Thank you, and I wish there was so many more like you. We'd all be better off. We'd be better off here in America, and we'd be better off all over the world. Young Turks.
That was a segment from hour one of the show.
Now for the better hour, the second hour.
Drums. You can get the whole show on TYTnetwork.com.
Back on the Young Turks, a bunch of great tweets. John Connor says, so slaughter in Gaza, Ebola, and bus rape. But on a lighter note, Bart is wearing shorts. LOL. Okay, great. TYT Basement says, how many pretty girls like that have to cover themselves up? It takes away from the beauty of the world as a whole. That is so true. And I've said this before, especially in regards to Persian women. The Iranian mullahs have done a crime against humanity, covering those women up. Okay. LK disagrees, though. LK says, hair is where Satan hides, and everybody knows that.
Of course.
Okay, good point. Good point. I hadn't thought of that. Hashtag Saudi Arabia. Okay. Oh, here's fun ones. Okay. First of all, Hysteric Raider says the answer to global peace is openness to sex. Hashtag giggity. So that's fun. And then David Kennedy says, always know when Jimmy's at Rebel headquarters. You can't beat that laugh. LOL. That's funny. And then Hubert Cumberdale says, why do I hear Jimmy Dores laugh in the studio yet not see him on camera? Outrageous. Well, there he is. Hey, Jimmy Dores in the building. Okay.
He's wearing his sunglasses indoors.
Yeah, that's.
Prescription.
All right.
He's a prescription.
Do you? I don't know how I feel about them.
No, he's got glaucoma. That's why he's Professor
Do you
Reed.
really have glaucoma? Oh, now I feel like a dick. Sorry.
No, I don't have glaucoma.
Oh, okay. Now you should feel like a dick.
You remember when Bush made fun of that reporter because of his sunglasses? Yeah. Nice shades, Skipper, or whatever he called him. Okay. Turns out he was blind.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I was outside. I was in the Rose Garden outside press conference.
That's right.
I love it. Okay.
It's like when Joe Biden told that guy to stand up, take applause, and he was in a wheelchair.
Bush and Biden, man, they make a good comedy team.
BB.
Yeah. They should think about that as soon as Biden retires in a couple of years. Oh, right, he's going to run for president. Good one. Okay. Anyway, all right. On to next story.
All right. Youngins these days do not consider television and movie celebrities to be big celebrities. They actually consider YouTube stars to be a much bigger deal. That's at least according to a survey that was commissioned by Variety. And the survey talked to people from the ages of 13 to 18, and the results are really, really fascinating. So let me tell you a little bit about their methodology, and then I'll give you the results. So the survey takers asked 1,500 respondents a battery of questions assessing how 20 well-known personalities stacked up in terms of approachability, authenticity, and other criteria considered aspects of their overall influence. Half of the 20 were drawn from the English language personalities with the most subscribers and video views on YouTube. The other half were represented by the celebrities with the highest Q scores among U.S. teens aged 13 to 18 as of March. So a score was then assessed to each YouTube and mainstream star based on how they fared in respondents' answers to the questions, and the resulting number was translated to a 100-point scale. The top 5 of the 6 of the top 10, and 6 of the top 10 were YouTube stars, which is insane.
It's not at all, actually. And so I'm amused by the mainstream media covering this, because everywhere we've seen the article, people are all like, what is this? I don't know these YouTube stars. How could they be bigger than Angelina Jolie? I don't believe it, right? And the woman writing it, Jezebel, Lindy West, says like, oh, we don't know what'll happen to them. They might fade into obscurity, or they might, like, basically insinuating graduate into the mainstream.
Yeah.
You don't understand. They already graduated. They're already bigger than the mainstream stars. But they can't get it through their head. Why? Because they're not in the demo. Since they're not 13 to 18, they think it's impossible. No, I don't believe it. Yes, you don't live there. Among 13 to 18-year-olds, these people are more popular. Who are they? Top 5 were Smosh, the Fine Brothers, PewDiePie, KSI, and Ryan Higa. I find this list exactly what I would expect, right? But for older people, their heads explode, right? They're like, oh, how could they be bigger? No. The kids have to watch what I watch. Why isn't Walter Matthau on this list?
I think the best part about this story, this particular story doesn't really try to talk about this, but my favorite part about new media and why it's so successful is because people like the uncensored authentic nature of it, right? Like, we don't have scripts, we don't have teleprompters, we don't have to worry about someone coming into the office immediately because we said something wrong. I called Ann Coulter a dumb bitch today, and no one's gonna slap me on the wrist for it. You know what I mean? And people like that raw content, that raw nature, which is why I think our show does well on YouTube. What's up with the smirk?
No. I'm smirking at the mainstream and their interpretation of this stuff,
Yes.
right? So, you know how many viewers we have under the age of 35? Unique. 18 million a month, okay? So, if you, my guess is, and look, I'm just guessing on this front. I know what their numbers are overall, but I don't know. But if you put together Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC for a whole month, I'd be shocked if they had 18 million viewers under the age of 35. I'd be shocked if they had 18 viewers under the age of 35, okay? So I do know the average age for CNN is 68, right? The average age for the viewer of Bill O'Reilly's show is 72, okay? So that's why, like, I get, look, honestly, I get frustrated because we built our success on YouTube. Yeah. So I'll run into 55-year-olds who will be like, oh, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I watch Bill O'Reilly, even though they're probably the youngest Bill O'Reilly viewer. So I think Bill O'Reilly is real and CNN is real. But since I'm not younger and I'm not under 35, I don't think it exists. No, that means, look, let me.
Just okay.
No, I'm not going to come now.
Go ahead.
You know what that means? That means you're stupid.
Damn.
No, it means you can't understand simple concepts. Like, I get, so for example, I don't watch fashion shows. I hate fashion.
Yeah, you do.
I do, okay. So it doesn't mean that I think that the people that watch fashion shows don't exist. Like no, I don't believe it. They don't exist. Of course they exist. I'm just not among them. I didn't love Oprah's show. A lot of people did. I didn't deny their existence, right?
Yeah.
So these people are like, Smosh, I don't know Smosh. Smosh can't be bigger than Angelina Jolie. Well, they are. So sad day for you.
This sounds like a personal problem, Uger.
Totally.
Yeah. It's like years of bitterness, but it's justified. But like, I don't give a shit about the 55-year-old who's watching Bill O'Reilly. What I do give a shit about are the advertisers who refuse to catch on to the fact that they should be investing their money to where the audience is, right? They're so freaking lazy. It's like, okay, we've been putting all this money into like CNN, MSNBC, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, they have smaller audiences, but it's the easy way out. We're not going to stir the pot. We're not going to do something different. Be enterprising. Do something different. It'll be great. But they just refuse to do it. So I'm mad at the advertisers. They're the dumb ones. Who cares what like people in their older years
think?
Let me
tell you something. It's generally... We're not going to do any favors for our show here by saying this, but it's the agencies, and they're so scared. They're like, oh, my God, but what if I don't buy CNN? Oh, no. You know that when we also go to buy advertising from time to time, right? We did it in the 2012 election. They said in Los Angeles, if you want to buy an ad for CNN, it'll cost you 4 times as much as MSNBC. Now, wait a minute. Now, so we're not talking online versus TV. I'm like, wait, I don't understand. Won't MSNBC get more viewers on election night? Yes, they will. And they did, right? And doesn't MSNBC normally get more viewers than CNN? Back then, absolutely, right? So why are you charging me 4 times as much for something that people... Because a lot of people buy that because they want to say to their bosses, well, you can't fire me. I bought CNN. I would fire you so quick... It would make. Why did you pay 4 times as much for something that only half the people watch? Now, when it comes to online, if you're trying to reach a younger audience and you're like, oh, no, you can't fire me because I bought Bill O'Reilly. Oh, you should be fired immediately. Immediately. Half of his audience is above the age of 72. You should, like, if you're trying to reach those people, you're nuts to go on television. The people have left television in droves, the younger people. They don't have cable. They're not going to buy cable. Here they are, and here are facts staring you in the face. And they'll be like, yeah, but I don't know the Fine Brothers.
It's crazy. All right, so let me just give you the top 20 really quickly so you get a sense of, how YouTubers did compared to traditional celebrities. So at number 20 was Leonardo DiCaprio, which pains my heart a little bit because I love Leo. Then we have Bethany Mota, who's a YouTube star, Ray William Johnson, obvious YouTube star, Michelle Phan, or is it Fawn? Do I always say her name wrong?
No, I think it's Phan.
Okay, great. And then Jenna Marbles is 16. 15 is Daniel Radcliffe, and then we have Johnny Depp, Vin Diesel, which is a shocking person on the list.
No, you know why? Because he's really popular in social media. That's why.
Right, yes. Then we have Betty White, which is awesome. Come on, Betty White's awesome.
No, I mean, it's amazing that she's on that list.
Yeah, that's great for her. I love that.
Seth Rogen is also on that list. At 10, we have Steve Carell. Then we have Katy Perry. Then at 8, we have Shane Dawson. 7, Jennifer Lawrence. 6, Paul Walker. And then here are the top 5, as Jake mentioned earlier. We have Ryan Higa, KSI, PewDiePie, The Fine Brothers, and at number 1, Smosh.
Sorry, mainstream media. Sorry. You know where we are? We're at the beginning of movies. When movies first started, the theater people were like, oh, please, I do declare, nobody will watch the movies. How silly. That's for the people, the masses. No, but it'll never catch on. And for decades, the theater stars were considered so much more important and popular than the movie stars. And the people in power would say, I don't know the movie stars. I know the theater star in New York, and he's a real star. Hey, whatever happened to those theater stars? Oh, right. Nobody knows them anymore.
Damn.
Okay.
I'm sure some people know them. That's kind of harsh.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Dropping elbows, man.
Yeah. No. Angela Lansbury's doing great. Oh, yeah, she's dead, too. Okay, she's great. Okay, I don't mean, no disrespect. Okay, finally, and now one more bitter man thing here. Rush Limbaugh claims he has 14 million listeners. He doesn't have any such thing. Okay. I literally put up a $10,000 bounty. I said, look, if Rush can prove that he has 14 or whatever his claim was, 50, I wrote it in a blog, 15 million, 20 million, go for it, big guy, go for it. Prove it, you'll take $10,000 from a lib. You'll show me. Conservatives know facts, liberals don't. Go ahead, prove your audience. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have 20, he doesn't have 15, he doesn't have 14. Okay. We have an undisputed, Google certified, 65 million views overall, 24 million unique viewers, okay? We are so much larger in all age groups than Rush Limbaugh. Not one person in Washington will ever believe that, okay? Like, eventually they will because he'll be out of business, okay? And we'll be the largest network in the world. I know. Oh, you're right. Sure, you will. Right. Hey, wait. How's CNN doing versus us on YouTube? Oh, right. We're 4 times larger.
Sorry.
4 times larger than CNN, right?
Cable news what?
I know. And then it'll be online, period. It'll be on all platforms. And they still won't believe it because their grandfathers will be watching CNN. And they'll be like, I don't understand. Why? That you... Rush! I know. Rush! Okay.
So animated.
I am. Okay. Rush can suck it.
Yeah.
He's gone. He's done for. Okay.
You know, Jack, he's artificially propped up anyway. So they make his show available for free to the stations, and then right-wing institutions just give him money to like the Heritage Foundation and what have you. We know that, right? So it's not even it's not capitalism. It's fucking welfare that Rush Limbaugh's living off of.
All right. One last thing. So Bill Kristol, hired in the past by New York Times, he's with ABC News now, he was Fox News, yada yada, neocon, who's wrong on every single thing in Iraq, but esteemed Weekly Standard. They run a magazine called The Weekly Standard. If you ask anybody in Washington, they'll know what The Weekly Standard is, right? If you ask people, Young Turks in Washington, they'll be like, what Young Turks? I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Weekly Standard has a circulation of 85,000. Period.
Damn.
85,000.
Damn. Killing it.
They probably don't even have that, but fuck it. Sure, yeah. Take 85,000. Mm-hmm. One of our videos, all of our videos average 77,000. So, okay, I'll do 1 1/4 videos and I'll beat your esteemed Weekly Standard. Okay. So, Bill Kristol. Big fucking deal, Bill Kristol.
Even though we're not getting the money necessary from advertisers yet, I feel like this warrants a making it rain gesture. Are you going to do it?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, but we are not making it rain. That's the one thing we're not doing.
We're making it rain with views. That's some form of making it rain.
That's true. We just crossed, on the network, 2 billion views. So we're billionaires in terms of views. Most certainly not money. Right. So hence the bitter man. Okay, just keep it real. Okay, but we are making it rain in terms of views. Yes! Okay.
Make it rain.
All right, guys, that's it. We ran out of time for LeBron. Doesn't matter. He's skinny. There's no good reason for it. Nobody gives a shit. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So in the post game, I will talk to you about how unbearable I am, if you didn't already get that sense from that segment. But my exploits at the gym.
Sounds
but
fun.
cutie baby stories as well. And if you're looking for an internship at TYT, go to marketing@tytnetwork.com, marketing@tytnetwork.com. You want a half an hour version of the show, nice and easy every morning, hulu.com/The Young Turks. And the reason Jimmy's in the studio is because I will be interviewing him about his book. One, buy the book at tytnetwork.com. You'll see the link, Amazon link. And number two, check out my interview with him at TYT Interviews a couple of days from now. Okay, go. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You liked that, didn't you?
All right. If you want the whole show, you like it even more, go to tytnetwork.com. Go under member options, and you can get the whole show anytime you like.